Cutting ties with people in your business can be difficult. Should you coach them up or coach them out? Let's talk about it.
To the Edgy Entrepreneur podcast, where we believe that if you want to be influential in your community, you must be a master of relationships, whether that's in your household or in your business or within the groups within your community itself. So welcome back, everyone. I am one of your co-hosts. I'm Daniel Tribby. I am a healthcare entrepreneur. I also work with other healthcare entrepreneurs from a coaching standpoint, and I have the pleasure of doing this podcast with...
Hi, everybody. I'm Coach Oriana. I'm a life and personal performance coach, executive coach, and relationship expert as well.
And this episode is all about when it's time to let someone go.
Specifically in business.
In business,
right?
Yes.
So coach them up or...
coach them the hell out the door. Let's go.
Yes.
So, and I know this is a topic that is difficult per se. You get into an employment relationship, and sometimes you form a deeper, significant bond, or maybe even become friends with some of the people you work with. And, it's time to let them go or time to make a decision whether or not you can coach them up or they need to no longer be a part of your organization, right?
Yeah, cutting ties with people in business can have a number of different implications. It can get complex for a lot of different reasons. You talked a little bit about the emotional component, right? Like maybe you've become friends or friendly with this person. Maybe you understand that they have complex personal circumstances, and letting them go and doing anything that would impact their pay, essentially. Their livelihood makes you feel some type of way. But also there are different laws and things like that impact the employment setting that you also might need to take into consideration as a business owner.
Right.
And those things matter as well.
And I think, too, what happens a lot of times as a business owner, one of the biggest mistakes that you make is you see a problem or some friction or some conflict within the team itself, and you go, oh, well, this person just isn't a good fit anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
That's one reaction, right? Another one is like, it'll work itself out.
Right. I'm going to just leave it alone, or it's gotten so uncomfortable that I don't want to say anything because I don't know what to say or how to say it or any of those types of situations.
The thing is also, despite the complexity of terminating some of these relationships or restructuring them, if you allow this to persist in your business, some of the implications of that could be even worse than handling it, right? Like
absolutely.
Damaging to your team. It could be damaging to other people in the organization. It could decrease productivity and performance across the board in a lot of different areas, or in critical functions. And so addressing it head on is always the best.
Sometimes it's actually not the employee is the problem. Sometimes it's you as the leader that's the problem.
Ooh, they're not ready for that conversation.
But we're going to break down, a few things. We're going to talk about these situations, when they arise, what it looks like, and kind of 3 components that you need to consider in whether or not you're deciding to coach people up or coach them out, right?
And this would be regardless of what caused the relationship or the circumstances to shift, right? At some point in time, a person shifted from, performing or otherwise doing well to underperforming or disconnected in some way. And so, you have those options. Do you keep them? Do you work with them? Do you maybe reposition them in your organization? Do you restructure their role? Do you give them more training, right? There's a lot of things to consider. Or do you cut ties with them, right? And so I think where a lot of people get stuck is in this particular question, right?
Right.
What do I do? Do I let them go or not, right? But or not, if you don't let them go, you also can't just keep them and do nothing. Yeah. Which is where a lot of people get stuck, right? You have to do something. So we're going to give you these 3 determining factors, right? What is it? What are the 3 things that you need to look at as a leader in an organization or as a business owner that would help you determine whether or not you keep this person?
So those 3 things are, the first one is determine what the grievances are, right? Just determine what the problem actually is. And it may not be what you think it is. It may be something that has nothing to do with work. So we're going to break down how to determine what those grievances are. And then we're going to discuss whether or not the employee has had adequate training, right? Or maybe they're been placed in a role that was not the traditional role for them, or what they expected to be the role was indeed not the role. So you've got to determine if that is the case. Have they been set up adequately to be successful? And then lastly, once you've gone through that, are they still a good fit for that particular position or the organization in general, right? So those three things we're going to walk you through.
So in making these three determinations, you're going to have to investigate, right? You're going to have to talk to people. You're going to have to look at the circumstances and the situation and think critically about the people involved, what's actually happening, what are people saying, what are people not saying, right? This requires some critical thinking in your leadership abilities.
A lot of listening on your part, too.
A lot of listening. Yeah, yeah, great point. Knowing that people and relationships are complex, and if you get into the emotions of it, you're less likely to be able to see clearly. And you might end up engaging in blaming, right? And so as a leader, it's your responsibility to kind of look at these matters from what I call a multidimensional perspective, right? Especially when you have more than one person involved, right? Individuals are multidimensional, but when you get a group of people together, right? A team within an organization, there are so many dimensions there that if you get caught up in the emotions or in blaming or things like that, or looking for who's at fault, you're likely to miss some really important factors that are going to impact your decision-making abilities when it comes to making these three determinations that we talked about. So that's why it's important to do your due diligence. Don't make assumptions. Don't place blame too early. Don't just draw a conclusion, this person's not a good fit, just to make it easier for yourself. Actually go through the motions. So let's start with number one, determining what the grievances are. Yeah. What does that look like?
Absolutely. So, and I want to say too, that what you just described is self-regulation to a T, right? Being aware of your emotions outside of what the factual information is. And so really, really huge thing to develop is self-regulation. If that's not something that you have dove into, I highly recommend you take a look at things like emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman has a really great book about emotional intelligence, as self-regulation is one of those. So really good points that you made there. So inside of our first point, which is determining what the grievances are, okay? We have to decide first, has something changed inside the professional context? Okay, so has their responsibilities as an employee changed? Has what they initially bought into been, like I mentioned earlier, different than their actual job duties at this point? So you've got to decide what's changed in the context of their work. Has there been something there that could potentially have caused this problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Have their responsibilities changed, right? Is this, maybe people are looking at this person, or you're looking at them going like, man, your attitude sucks. And that person's sitting there going, I'm not doing any of the things that I was actually hired to do.
Right.
What am I doing here? Why am I doing these things? Why am I being asked to take on these responsibilities, right? And so if you don't pause to actually get a handle on what the situation is, you might just be assuming it's the person when really it's the situation and circumstances that you put them in as a leader or in that organization.
I think too, you could be, you have hired someone or put them into a role where they just don't match the role. Right?
That's entirely possible.
Yeah. So, and that doesn't mean that they're not suited to work for the organization. It just may mean that they're not suited to work in that role.
Right. Yeah. And so the solution might be in just if there is another role that is available that makes more sense for that individual or could easily be created that matches that person's skill sets and zone of genius, and you could utilize those skills and that genius, then, create that role for them. Right.
And I think too, and this is a leadership thing, and when you hire people, we have a tendency as leaders, right, to hire people that are like us, right? We want people who like the same things, who might share similar opinions, who are easy to work with because we understand each other and how we think. The problem is when you do that, you're missing a large portion of the personality wheel, right, that contributes to growth or creativity inside your business. Right. So you need to ask yourself, is this person the real problem, or is it your perception of the difference in their opinion that's the problem.
Right.
So if you get somebody in there who doesn't share the same opinion as everyone else, or is not always on board with everyone else, and you just think they're pushing back against everyone because they want to be different, that may not necessarily be the case. It may be you as the leader having this perception that their opinion is frictional or abrasive.
And that might be because you're so accustomed with everybody going with the flow around you and having a bunch of yay sayers around you. And what you might want to consider is that having a person who gives a difference of opinion or can see something from a different perspective and actually has the guts to voice it in a setting where nobody else is actually quite a blessing.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so what I find is that a lot of times it's, a frictional opinion and or the way it's being communicated. Right. So communication styles is the other thing. Right? Sometimes what a person is saying, there's not necessarily wrong with the material of what's being said, but it's the way it's being delivered, maybe not as gracefully or eloquently as one would like, that makes you feel like, I don't know if this person is a fit for my team or my organization. Well, that I would say is an opportunity for growth on all sides, right? For yourself as a leader, right? Are you leaning in to a person that has a different communication style? Right? Do you need a person to pad and coddle all of their commentary towards you? And if so, why?
Yeah.
Why do you need to be patted and coddled in order to receive valid feedback and communication?
Like, so if you come across in a certain abrasive manner, or your delivery is,
Rough around the edges,
right,
to say
there's
the
some
least.
people who are like, oh my God, like I can't even hear what he's saying because he's so rude when he says it. Like so I get that. And there have been times when I have had to coach people, say, hey, look, I know you have valid points and you can talk to me. I would rather you talk to me, cut through the BS and let's get right to it. I don't need you to beat around the bush. Like, tell me how it is and let's rock and roll. But there are other people that don't receive information the same way. Yeah. And so when you come across at them that way, they tune you out just based upon the abrasive nature. Right. And so this brings me to kind of the personality traits. Right. So there's a lot of different assessments out there that you can dive into that shows you personality traits for people, or even business traits for people. How do they work? How do they receive information? What kind of people are they? Because I have no doubt that some of you have been in meetings with a team and then everybody seems to be on board, but there's that one person that raises their hand and goes, yeah, but, and everybody goes, oh, shit.
Now we have to stay here longer.
God, Oriana always has something to say. But that person may be looking through a different lens than you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It could be just a different perception. And so people don't often want to see the other person because they view it as obstructive, right? Or the inability to get on board, right? You're intrusive with your behavior. And
not being a team player.
Right, not being a team player, rather than they're just there because they might have a tendency to lean towards safety versus risk, right? So they're going to say, okay, well, what you're saying is great, but what are all the problems that might happen? And those people are valuable because a lot of times they're bringing an opinion to the table that nobody else had or nobody else thought of.
Yeah.
So instead of approaching them with oh my God, why didn't she just shut up? Think of it as, okay, well, what can I take from this person that I may not have thought of?
Yeah, that very detailed, very conscientious person is going to be, especially if they're anywhere near the front line of execution on a project, they're the ones who are going to be in the meeting going, wait a minute. I need more information, right? Let me explain to you why that might not work, why there's more to it, why we need these other resources before we could actually execute on that, right? And if, the person or people in the room that are big picture visionary style who don't want to get into the weeds and into the details, if your reaction to that is just like, why do you always have to impose, with details and barriers and things like that and obstacles, that person could seem like they're a naysayer when really they're bringing up some very valid points. So all of that to say that as a leader, if you have individuals from your team or your organization coming to you and going, with complaints about another person who's always, bringing up what they consider to be, the minutia, you really need to investigate and make a determination about is it valid? Are they validly putting forward minutia and obstacles that don't add value? Or are they trying to make you and the team aware of what actual obstacles lie in the way of execution on projects that need to be addressed before people can take action.
Absolutely.
That person is extraordinarily valuable in your organization.
1,000 times over. And like we mentioned, there's plenty of different assessments, vehicles that you can use to determine people's personality traits or their work traits, those types of things. So definitely check into some of those. It may help bring your team together or give you a difference of thought process or standpoint on how somebody else is thinking. So we gave you some professional grievances that could potentially be the problem. Now let's talk about personal grievances. All right. So has anything changed for this particular person outside of their business world? Right? We never really know what people are going through on the outside. I know a lot of you may be thinking, well, you shouldn't be bringing your personal life into work. Okay. Let's squash this. All right. If I have something going on personally at home, there's a chance that it is affecting my mental capability. It's affecting the way that I think. It's constantly on my mind. So, and it can take away from my attention or from my creativity or from my willingness to participate with the group or even mend relationships inside the group, right? So we never really know what people are going through on a personal level. And it is up to you to investigate that from a leadership standpoint. You want to know if there's anything outside of the office that could be impacting your employees' ability to show up powerfully at work, right?
They could be going through any number of different things, from illness to childcare problems to, relationship problems, right? Divorces, a spouse's illness, housing insecurity, all kinds of different things, right? That if you don't stop to relate to your staff or to your team member on a human to human level, right? If you haven't never done that before, this is going to be a much harder conversation to have, right? Like you don't want to wait until this moment to start seeing your people as exactly that, people, right? Like you have to understand, this old school way of thinking where, you leave your personal life at the door and don't bring that into your company. That doesn't work these days. That doesn't exist. It never did. It was never possible for anyone to do that. People have to bring their full selves into your organization if they're going to perform well, right? And the more that you welcome that as a leader, the better outcomes you'll get with your people, and the more forthcoming and open they'll be about, hey, I'm having these issues at home that are impacting me at work. Imagine if you could have that conversation with somebody proactively because they proactively came to you to talk to you versus, a shift in performance, a downshift in productivity. And all of a sudden it's like, what the hell's going on? And then you figure out, oh, they're going through cancer treatments. Come on, right? Like it's much better for you as a leader to establish these person-to-person relationships with your team members so that these conversations, these issues can come up easily and early on.
Yeah.
But yeah, people
it's all
are
about
people.
being empathetic, right? So, and you want to show that you understand. As the leader, you want to show up powerfully for that person, show that you understand. I'm going to advise all of you, do not get in a situation where you're coaching your team members or your employees on personal matters. Avoid that. But what you can do is advise them on who they could talk to, right? Or if you know somebody, or, hey, I've got a guy that could help you with your car problem that's preventing you from getting to and from work. Hey, you're having relationship issues. I know a really good coach I could connect you with. That's perfectly fine. Show empathy for them and help them find external solutions, but do not be an internal solution for them at the office. That's breeding some other issues that you don't want.
Yeah. The only thing you're coaching through as a leader is their ability to continue to perform or to raise their performance back to the level that is expected in the office within the context. You're definitely not coaching them on their relationship problems. But you are supporting them and providing them with resources so that they can get what they need.
So once you've identified those grievances, you've taken that step, we found out, is it personal, is it professional, is it a mixture of the two?
Sure.
Right? Once you've discovered that, what's next in our process?
Yes. Then you need to determine whether or not you and or your organization has set this person up to be successful in their role. Right? Have they been giving the training, the resources? Have they been provided with the feedback consistently, right? Sometimes people come into an organization thinking this is what I was brought here to do. And then they're never provided feedback, and all of a sudden, right, leadership is like, you're not doing the things we want you to do, right? That represents a giant miscommunication, not a lack of performance, right? So has the person been set up for success? That is the next determination you're making as a leader.
And then have the expectations been laid out as to what success looks like, right? So we have a tendency to hire people based upon their prior experience. And then when you do that, you're just being like, oh, okay, well, they know what they're doing. And then you just abdicate them into a role and expect them to do it exactly the way you envisioned them doing it without actually delegating and showing them the way they need to do it inside your organization, right? And that sometimes can cause a gap, right? And people think, oh, this other person's not doing their job. Well, maybe they're just doing the job that they thought was handed to them versus the expectations that were set for them in order to have them be their most successful self.
I hope that people can see, just based on this discussion, how much could actually be in your blind spot as a leader, right? And that's why we're encouraging you to do a thorough, what we're calling an investigation. I know that's a heavy word, but in that process of investigating, you're making these 3 determinations that we're talking about, because so much could be in your blind spot. So many important details that matter and would make a difference about whether or not you're going to terminate a person's employment and cut ties with them, right? Which is a huge decision.
I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a front desk employee. Let's call her Sally. I don't have an employee named Sally, so we're just going to call her Sally. And let's say that part of the job description and her duties on a regular basis is to, of course, she's supposed to answer the phone, greet people when they walk in the door, have them fill out their paperwork, that kind of stuff. But one of her responsibilities is also to make sure that the lobby is straight, it's clean, it looks, inviting for people to come sit in it. There's not magazines and shit everywhere. Like, it's nice and tidy. And the last few times I've been in the office, I've noticed that the front office is not tidy. So I have 2 choices. I can go in and blast her and be like, yo, why are you not holding up this end of the bargain? That's what we hired you to do. How come you're not doing it? I'm going to punish you, right? Or I could be like, hey, Sally, I noticed that, and I've mentioned this before, that part of your job is to make sure that the lobby stays nice and tidy and clean. And the last few times I've been in here, I've noticed that it hasn't been that way. So can you tell me what's going on, right? And Sally could use an array of things, just like, oh, I'm just so busy, I forgot. Or she could say, I thought it was clean. Like, her standard of what is tidy,
right, is different than yours.
Is different than mine.
Right.
Right. So at that point, is now my job to instruct her on my expectation of what I mean by tidy. And then we put her on an action improvement plan, right? She takes care of it, or maybe she doesn't. But if she doesn't, that's an opportunity for me to then say, okay, we've talked about this. Why is it not getting done? And it could not be because she just doesn't feel like doing it. It could be that the phones are ringing off the hook and there's people in there and she legitimately doesn't have time. If she legitimately doesn't have time, then that's my problem to fix. It's not hers.
Such a great point.
So I need to, 1, hire somebody else to take some of the load off so Sally can make sure the lobby is tidy, or I have somebody else do it who doesn't have the same load. Either way, I can't punish her for a barrier that's my responsibility to remove.
That's leadership, right? Because a lot of times we want to, abdicate roles and responsibilities to people and then become upset when they don't execute on those roles and responsibilities exactly to the extent of our expectations, but we're not providing feedback, right? Or the thing that you wanted done has gone undone for 3 months and now you blow up, right? Instead of consistently giving that person not only feedback, but feedback and an expectation and opportunity of how quickly they need to correct course.
Absolutely.
The timeline is critical, right? When would you like me to start doing that? Effective immediately. Okay, thank you, right? Or is it effective next week? Is it effective the next time a specific thing? Maybe it's not cleaning up the lobby, but it's running a weekly or a monthly report, right? And it's like effective the first of every month. This is the thing that I need for you to do now, right? And so, part of this is a very large part of a person's performance in the workplace has to do with you as a leader.
All right, so we've discussed our grievances, we found out what they are, and then we've talked about whether or not this person has been adequately trained, had they had the coaching. If not, you got to give it to them, right? And then at this point, you've got to decide whether or not you need to shift their role inside the business or you need to shift their ass out of the business.
Right.
Right. So you got to determine you've went through the first two stages. Okay. What's the grievance? Have they had adequate training? Now you got to decide, do we continue to employ them with these changes or do we boot them out because they're actually not a right fit?
Right. And this is like, I understand the grievances or I can resolve them or provide resources to resolve them to some extent to bring performance back up to expectations. And I've provided this person with all the tools and resources to do their job well, right? So have they been set up for success? Check. Yes, they have, right? I understand the grievances. Check. Yes, I do. And I've done everything that I can do within my power. Now, right? Are they still a fit for the organization, right? Did their attitude shift after being supported by you as a leader? Did their performance shift? Did their productivity shift? Did their relationships in the office with you and with other people shift? And if the answers to that are no,
bye, Felicia.
Right? This is why I say that people fire themselves. And I know that that's harsh, but just know it's coming from 15 years of experience in human resources and sitting in on a whole lot of terminations of employment. You know, people really do fire themselves because there are limitations to how much you can do for them as a leader and as an organization. And once you hit that wall, then you get to a place where you are like, you're either going to bend over backwards to keep this person in your organization, to give them more and more and more, right? Which puts them in the power position within your company, or you're just going to make a hard decision, right? Which is, we're going to cut ties with you, right? I call it giving people their freedom. I'm going to give you your freedom so that you can go and find the thing that matches your life purpose and that you love.
Right.
Right?
Because this is clearly not it.
Because this ain't it. And that's okay. That's okay, right?
Right. And I think too, I mean, and eloquence is big here, right? Like you don't want to just be like, hey, this shit is not working out, pack up your shit and go. You want to have shown on paper, right, that you have done all of these things. Hey, we've met with you, we've coached you, we've provided help for you, we've removed barriers for you, but you continue to not satisfy the need. And so we've talked about what needs to get done, why it hasn't been getting done. And at this point, we're going to have to move a different direction and give you your freedom, you know, as you mentioned. And it's, if you can, this is such a different situation than when you sit back and just say, well, this person's not a good fit. Right? Yeah. Because it's based upon your own perception of whether or not they're a good fit versus real-time data that proves that they are or are not a good fit. Right? And if you've taken diligent steps as the leader, the owner of your group, and you have established what the grievances are, you've put the coaching into place, you've communicated and done all the things necessary to set the expectation, and it's still not getting met, then you can justify saying this person wasn't a good fit.
Right.
But if you haven't done those things, you're basing it on usually emotional circumstances.
Which are biased 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And that's when you open yourself up to getting slapped with a complaint or a lawsuit or something like that. Because if you cannot explain in black and white terms what not a good fit means, meaning we gave this person all of the tools for success and they still couldn't pick up the tools and use them. And here is documented proof that we tried as much as we could as an organization reasonably. Right? If you cannot show that, then anybody can make the case that not a good fit in your company means it's because I'm brown, it's because I'm a woman, it's because I was pregnant, it's because I'm married, it's because I'm not married, it's because I have kids, it's because of any reason that they personally felt was the reason for the grievance. And that is a huge level of exposure that nobody should expose themselves to as a leader, because it's just not necessary.
Yeah.
Right? If you're taking the time to make these three determinations, right, to figure out what the person's grievances are and address them, to figure out if the person has been set up for success and address that, and then give timely and constructive feedback and set proper expectations, if you've done all that and you've documented it and the person still can't do the job well, can't perform, you are well within your right to cut ties with them. But if you haven't done those things and you're cutting ties, I'm telling you, you're doing it prematurely.
And I'm going to challenge all of you to think for a second. How many of you made emotional decisions on letting someone go? You didn't self-regulate well. How many of those people could have been fantastic employees for you, but you didn't investigate, you didn't determine the barriers, you didn't set the expectations, and you didn't attempt to find out what the grievances were? How many of you have probably lost really great potential employees by not going through this process?
I mean, in the circumstance, best case scenario is you get somebody who's a really independent worker and doesn't actually need or rely on your feedback, and you're actually somewhat happy with what they're doing. Worst case scenario, which your best case could also turn into your worst case, is that you become overly reliant on what that person is doing and their skill set, while also having no idea what they do or how they do it. And so you put them in a power position where they can literally hold you hostage. And if their attitude sucks, you're in trouble, right? Because now you can't break up with them.
Right. Absolutely. So if you would like to learn more on how to identify the right people to work with in your business, we wrote a blog that was published on February 23rd of 2022. You can go to edgyentrepreneurs.com and you can access that blog. Take a look at it. It will greatly help you understand who you need to identify with from a hiring standpoint, and hopefully help you miss the bullet on having to have these conversations about coaching people up and coaching them out.
If you'd like to join our community, we have an online community on Facebook where we go live weekly. And we invite you to join so that you can have not only more in-depth discussions with us about topics like this, but also so that you can engage with us and ask us your questions and receive live coaching in our community. So just text the word EDGY, EDGY, to 33777, and you'll get a link to join the community and visit our website and enjoy the podcast.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us this week. We'll be back in a couple weeks with some more eargasms for you. I hope everybody is staying healthy and staying well. We'll talk soon.
Bye, everyone.